I do appreciate Larry coming up with such a great title for me, The Afterlife, because electronics tend to be something we don't think about until it's too late, right? In many cases, when it's time to get rid of them, what do we do? Or how do we manage those? So did you know that 134.5 million IT assets currently sit idle in America? Now, I think this is like last year's statistic from the EPA, but that's pretty scary fact. Also, the average data breach cost has grown, according to Pennoman Institute, $4 million on average. Now, that's all companies. So ask Target how much their data breach cost them. I'm sure it was a little more than $4 million. So when you're dealing with IT assets, when you're dealing with any types of infrastructure and things of that nature, and you're trying to figure out exactly how do we figure out who to use, who to partner with, I think some of the key things are to start thinking about certifications. In the electronics recycling and IT asset disposition world, the eSteward and R2 certifications are two of the certifications that are used primarily to help determine their environmental plans and help to make sure that they're doing things right. So that's just part of it. The other thing is to consider the security, because in many cases, companies could be sending in equipment. They could be sending brand new equipment. I deal with many companies that say, I don't want this getting back in the secondary market. I want it destroyed because I don't want to have to service these parts, 15 years or 5 years down the line or whatever the case may be. I want this stuff shredded and destroyed. And so we have to have a lot of heavy security around our facilities. So that can be security cameras. This is a particular facility right here in Texas where it's single guard shack entry point, surveillance cameras, etc. What I found interesting is that many companies don't even have a formal IT asset management plan. They're not even sure. They buy a particular product, they service it for a certain length of time in their ITs, they manage it, but they don't calculate the overall cost of the purchase, managing the equipment, the IT cost, and the disposition of the asset. And that's something that I just wanted to bring up. And what's important to you? Do you have this little office sitting off to the side that's got all your IT assets in it? It could even be your infrastructure stuff. What about set-top boxes and other types of infrastructure equipment? It's just sitting there. How is it being managed, especially those with data-containing devices? Are they already sanitized, or are they sitting in an office that's unsecure with all this data still on it, where any employee could just walk out with it? They probably are doing it innocently too. They probably just think, I'll reuse this laptop at home. I just want to surf the internet, that's all. But there's data on there that you don't want getting out, and it could be hacked. And I've seen that happen way too many times. So are you keeping inventory records internally? This is something that you might want to consider as well. Product life cycle, it's either going to come in and it's going to go through a responsible recycling, meaning it's end of life. It's either you want it destroyed or it's beyond economical value for in the secondary market, you want it recycled. Or maybe there's intelligent reuse. You want to look at options where you can reuse that. Say you've got set-top boxes and they've got hard drives still in them. And you want to see if those hard drives still have some value, but you want to, of course, wipe the data and make sure that you have those options available to you. It could be IT assets that within the company, and you've only got assets that are only 3 to 4 years old, they still have a very good value in the secondary market. So that's stuff that you may want to, of course, consider in your IT asset management plan as well. ITAD solutions, of course, you want to look at information management, lifecycle management, performance, and strategic planning. That can be in a lot of things, paperwork. Asset managed solutions could involve a lot of things. White glove service tends to be, I've got this data center. I don't have the time or the manpower to pull 15 server racks so I can put in 15 new ones. Can you send people that can do that? That can be done. There's other services that involve take-back programs, redeployment services, and of course there's drive wiping, and there's full functionality testing of equipment, so on and so forth when it comes to asset managed services. Now those services can go outside of the IT world as well. There are several companies that we actually get in large pieces of equipment. They want serial scanning and detailed audit reporting for those services. So there's the barcode scanning. We also remove asset tags. You definitely don't want that stuff back out. People don't need to know. One of the problems we found is that a company they had a guy that was coming out to pick their stuff up, and he did it for free. But he just would pile it up into a container and ship it overseas. And one day somebody happened to be filming this place overseas and saw the asset tag. That was the EPA. So this is something that's very important to us. It should be something very important to you. When it comes to secure and simple, fast electronic media destruction, some of the other things to consider are, do I want it just destroyed to make sure that data is completely erased? Is it that important? And if not, maybe I can reuse these data containing devices, hard drives. What type of software are being used? Are the companies that you're using managing the software in such a way that they're sending it off to maybe a forensics lab to confirm that the software is continually operational? That's something to consider as well. Can the companies that you manage, that help manage your services, can they be flexible with you? This is a company that we actually set up a process to quickly scan set-top boxes, CES, that type of material, pull hard drives, serial scan to provide detailed reporting, and then quickly maneuver the box for destruction and recycling off to that particular process. And then there's detailed reporting. You can have as much detail as you want, but this reporting, when it's received, basic audit reports, detailed as far as lot transactions. Let's say I'm picking up material from your facility and you've got 6,000 desktops. You can get it detailed down to every desktop has its make, model, serial number, and exactly what happened to that particular unit. Did it fail testing? Was the hard drive not even there? And that type of detail can be provided as well. So these are just some of the things that are important to keep in mind when you're thinking about IT asset disposition and having these things managed. The paperwork, the environmental security that you would look into, these are very, very important things.
You have any questions for Michael?
Sorry.
Are you reselling any of this stuff? Or?
Yes, absolutely. In some cases, when customers say, we want you to resell as much as we possibly can see resold. Now, we'll look at items to make sure that they actually meet what we call cut line, that they are actually remarketable. Sometimes a unit, you got an old 486, sorry, nobody's really interested in that. But we will actually test those units, remove asset tag information, and then remarket that. It's usually under a revenue share program with the customer. And of course, all hard drives are removed and wiped, to standard. So,
with selling prices, you track the selling prices?
Absolutely, because in many cases, we usually allow a certain timeline to do all the service for a customer, and that usually is about within 60 days. But at that time, sometimes all the equipment's sold, but we may have a little bit left, so we'll do a fair market value on what's remaining so that we can settle within a speedier time. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So specifically to handsets or cell phone devices, do you guys have any experience? And if you do, what the main venues, where the used one goes, who buys them or dispose of them?
We have a little bit of experience with that, not because there are companies that have got into primarily managing the mobile handsets. Now, we certainly can manage those, and we do on a smaller scale in comparison. That tends to be secondary markets that can be anywhere in the U.S. It can be down in South America. Tend to be big marketplaces for the mobile handsets, but it's usually, of course, smartphones. And if it's, I'm trying to think of the exact age, but if we start going back to like the Apple 3G and I think like the 4s even, anything before that, it's already something that nobody's really interested in.
Yeah, as you go into these data centers and whatnot, how do you determine the fair market value that you might offer to the party that is wanting you to come in and buy that equipment?
Right. So partly two things. I like to try to provide a format that allows you to list make, model, serial number, configuration of the equipment. It allows us also to go back and see where the fair market value is on that equipment at that particular time. Not only historically, but also offering it to, we have a massive list of buyers that are all out there that are all looking for equipment all the time. So they're basically take this list and they send it out and they get bids on this. And then we can actually get that value back for you that way.
So this is a little bit of a strange question, but how do you get paid? Are you, when you're selling or you're scrapping or you're some sort of reclaim involved,
Sure.
does the fee that you're charging your clients ever come in lower than what you're reselling the product for?
The fee that
Is it net positive or negative? In other words, when you're charging a fee for your client to get rid of this stuff.
Well, it depends on the equipment. So what we're looking at, like, let's start with what we call EOL, end of life. If we're just recycling something, in many cases, IT equipment, we already have an idea based on historical data. We're tearing equipment apart. We know what type of commodities are inside. The circuit board tends to be where most of the value is, and that's in any electronic device. The majority of the value is in the circuit board. We're calculating exactly what our cost of recycling is, and then the recovery of the commodities. And then of course the margin. And that's all calculated in advance. And when we're talking with customers that are looking for that destruction process, we can calculate those values ahead of time with the customer. Now on the asset managed services side, we're already trying to calculate ahead of time with them if the type of product they're going to be sending is cut line or below cut line. If it's going to be above cut line and it is going to have remarketing value, then we're going to calculate the cost of services that go into that to determine ahead of time whether it's going to be a value back to them, where we'll be sending checks. And in most cases, that's what we like to see. We don't want too many assets running through that service if we can't, return value back to the customer.
So you don't take everything, you just...
No, we do. We can take everything. I've got customers that say, listen, I want to send you this material to you. There's one right here in Austin that's a government entity, and they send me all types of IT assets and different types. Some of it's junk, but they want me to manage and asset manage that, and they get primarily invoices, but they have the detailed auditing report, and they like that. They like to be able to say, this is how this material was managed. Does that make sense, or did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Would you say offhand that unless the stuff's reasonably new, that most of the time they'll be writing you a check, and the times that you'll be writing them a check would be something maybe not more than 2 or 3 years old?
If it's end of life and we have to recycle it, it depends on the type of equipment. If it's something that usually is a processing type of device, so it's a handset, tablet, PC, laptop, servers, networking equipment, even if that stuff is scrapped, it still has value. There's enough inherent value in the circuit board material to still pay the customer if it comes in under that program, right? Now, some lower grade stuff like printers, copiers, fax machines, keyboards, mice, that's just lower end stuff. It's a dime a dozen. Nobody's interested in buying new. You can get a printer for $60. It's cheaper to buy one. And as soon as the inkjet cartridge runs out, it's cheaper to go buy a new one because you're going to spend $60 on a new cartridge, right? So, I know it's funny. That happens all the time. You bet.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Appreciate it. Thank you.